This is Blackjacked, a podcast about how the civil rights movement went left.
Oh man, I gotta get up. I gotta go. Ooh. I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta get up and go. I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta get up.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Blackjack Podcast. Today we are going to talk about the chapter of history when Dr. King finally starts to wake up. He had been through a lot of things, obviously started from the bus boycott, and sometime in 1962, and he starts to make some observations. This boycotting stuff is powerful. Now, again, we talked about in episode 7, there's a huge missed opportunity with the Montgomery bus boycott. Rather than just boycotting the buses, S.B. Fuller said, yo, let's buy the bus line. Wasn't really there at that time. But Dr. King starts to see every campaign we start with the boycotts, and the boycotts are very effective. And we talked about also in episode 7, 1961, the Albany campaign is a failure, but the boycott is powerful. The bus boycott is so powerful that the bus company shuts down. And so he's looking at this and saying, how can we leverage this a little bit more for our financial situation? He starts to wake up. Now in Philadelphia, there's a minister by the name of Leon Sullivan, and he has this selective patronage program. In other words, they choose to selectively boycott companies to sort of coerce them into hiring more black people. So it's a jobs program. He wants to create jobs, and it's actually working. In October of 1962, Dr. King invites this dude down like, let's look at what you're doing. In that program, he wants to adopt Operation Breadbasket. The core of it is, hey, let's look at the employment stats for all these companies. All y'all doing business in the hood, you're making money off of black people, but are you hiring black people? And if you're not, then we're going to selectively boycott you until you agree to hire black folks. Now, again, this isn't economic independence, but people need jobs today. And so it's effective in that sense. So they start doing that. But Operation Breadbasket goes to a whole new stratosphere in Chicago. There's a young guy by the name of Jesse Jackson, whom we all know today. Jesse Jackson came from South Carolina, got a really interesting backstory. He's born to a teenage mom. His dad actually lives across the street, but can't all the way acknowledge him because, he had a family already. Like, it's a lot going on. But he ends up coming to Chicago to go to seminary. And, he's one of Dr. King's sort of younger lieutenants. He gets on, and Dr. King puts him over the Breadbasket in Chicago starting in 1966. Jesse Jackson goes nuts. So again, they look at some of the big milk companies or soft drink companies and they say, okay, you're doing business in the hood. You're making profits here. Let's pull up your employment stats to see if they match the neighborhood. And if that's not true, we're going to sit down and say, hey, we need you to hire black people. We also want to look at the companies who have black people working, but they're in very menial jobs. Can you upgrade those jobs to something better? Promote them. If they don't agree, then we start boycotting. And so all the ministers in the neighborhoods will put the word out like, yo, don't buy this company or don't buy milk from this company. Well, this is very effective. In fact, between 1966 and 1971, Breadbasket fills at least 2,250 positions. Now, those are new positions. Now, if you add the positions where people have a job and then they upgrade those jobs, you're talking about 4,500 jobs. And you're talking about $29 million in income that's coming into the black community that wasn't there before. Now, in 2016 dollars, that's $200 million. Now, that doesn't change the entire city of Chicago, but it's definitely a start, right? By the way, I'm getting a lot of this information from a book by a white minister who was very involved with Breadbasket from the very beginning, Martin Deppe, Deppe, Martin Deppe, about Operation Breadbasket. Look it up. It's a pretty good book. He does a very meticulous accounting of everything that happened. So this program is really doing something. Now, Jesse takes it to a new level, though, from even that. It was supposed to just be about jobs. And in fact, if you listen to Martin Deppe and others who were supportive of the program, particularly white supporters, I think, they were comfortable with that part. But Jesse wants to go somewhere different. He wants to actually look at black entrepreneurship. So not just jobs. He says to these white companies doing business, tell you what, not only do we want you to hire some black people, we want you to actually deposit some of your money in black banks in Chicago. You're doing business in this community. You need to deposit some of your money so it stays in this community. Not only that, he starts insisting on these companies doing business with black companies. So, for example, if there's a grocery store being built, he says, well, use a black contractor to build the grocery store. Or maybe a company needs an extermination. We'll hire black exterminators. He starts getting contracts with black companies. And this is huge. This is a game changer. And a lot of black entrepreneurs get their start messing with Jesse. So Operation Breadbasket, it evolved from not just a program, it became a movement in Chicago. So on Saturdays, they have their big breadbasket, kind of like services, kind of rallies. Everybody comes. I mean, you'll see stars like Bill Cosby's of the world there. You'll see Dick Gregory. You'll see all kind of people. Again, episode 7, we talked about S.B. Fuller. He's this big conservative. He kind of beef with Dr. King. S.B. Fuller comes to a breadbasket lunch and speaks. Everybody comes, right? It's like the place to be. And a lot of people get their start. People like John Rogers. He's the founder of Ariel Investments, the largest minority-owned investment firm in the world. At least that's what they say. I assume that's true. But Jesse Jackson helps John Rogers. He introduces him to people. He helps him get access to pension funds for the city of Chicago and managing those funds, right? Because black people are, working in these schools and other, public positions. They are city employees, government employees, but who's managing all the pension funds? Well, a bunch of white people. So Jesse helps him with that. And today, John Rogers is huge, but he got his start messing with Jesse Jackson. In fact, Jesse Jackson actually has his, later he starts a Rainbow Push Coalition. We'll go there. We'll get there. But they have this Wall Street project, and it's been going on for some decades. Well, that's where Jesse Jackson introduces him to all these CEOs. And so today, General Motors, for example, is one of Ariel Investments' largest clients. I assume they still have that. At least some years ago they were. Well, again, Jesse Jackson does this. So Jesse's making big moves. Here's the problem. There's a few problems happening here. Dr. King is realizing this breadbasket thing is the truth. This is sort of where we need to start moving towards. And in fact, breadbasket is the only positive he has going. Remember, after the Chicago movement in 66, that didn't go very well. Dr. King needs some wins. He's not getting many wins. Most of the wins he's getting is from breadbasket. He's getting all this praise in the black press for all the fabulous things they're doing. He's not getting much praise for much else these days. It's breadbasket. Breadbasket is putting money in the black community. Breadbasket has momentum. Breadbasket. And so he wants to make this program national. So starting in 1967, he brings a bunch of people together and say, look, we got to push this thing national. Jesse, from all accounts, seems more concerned about building his own kingdom in Chicago. And for good reason. He's a really young guy. He's all of a sudden the man. He's making all this money for all these black people, and they're happy to share it. I have it on good authority from people who were around, like they bought him a home. Like a lot of black entrepreneurs came together and buy him this huge home. He's getting a lot of perks. He's living good. Jesse's having a good time in Chicago. Well, Dr. King keeps saying like, no, that's great, but I need you to replicate this in Cleveland, replicate this in Detroit. And Jesse just never really moves very much on this. There's some gestures, and Dr. King's very frustrated. And he actually calls him out like, yo, I think you're just trying to build your own little kingdom in Chicago. And so this program that shows real promise, it doesn't really get replicated. It doesn't really take on a national footprint because Jesse's just focused on Chicago. Now, I'm not saying he's necessarily wrong. I mean, I think working and investing in one community at a time is effective. I think people try to scale and go national with things that haven't really been proven as a concept locally. But Dr. King has a bigger vision, and Jesse's just not really going. Now, having said that, Breadbasket was limited anyway. Remember, the whole core of the program is trying to negotiate for jobs with white companies. That's not really controlling your own economics as a community. So again, go back to episode 6. Elijah Muhammad says, hey, here's a blueprint. We can do this by ourselves. We can build our own industry. Jesse has the black entrepreneurship part, and I think that was brilliant. But the core of the program was always jobs. That's a good starting place. I think Jesse had a sense of where it could go. It just never quite got there. It was still overly reliant on white jobs. And so it backfires at times. There are instances, and you can find this in Martin Depp's book, where they boycott companies and those companies go out of business. They can't even stay in business. So you're still depending on white people for your economic growth. You're still overly reliant on them to build infrastructure for you, to provide jobs for you. I think Breadbasket was a great start. I think jobs are a great start, but we got to evolve. We have to grow from there and look at what other people are doing, like Elijah Muhammad, and say, okay, how do we take our organizing energy and go towards something for ourselves? How do we build for ourselves? How do we capitalize on that and have jobs that we control? And we never quite got there. But again, there were stars, right? Because one of the other things Breadbasket did is they would go to these stores in the hood and say, okay, not only do we want you to deposit money into black-owned banks, we want you to have black products on the shelf. And so there are products and black entrepreneurs, they negotiate that they get those products on the shelf. And they end up getting some success there. They have something like $5 million being sold annually for black-owned products. These are huge gains for these companies. But it never got to the point of maturity, especially not nationally. And the blueprint wasn't tweaked enough to where it was totally about independence. It was still very reliant on those white jobs. So what happens to Breadbasket? This dynamic program, which again is saving King's butt because he has no other wins. In fact, Martin Deb writes another account where Dr. King couldn't meet the payroll. His organization, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, they end up in Chicago, and a bunch of black entrepreneurs just raise an offering and say, "Hey, here's a check." I don't remember off the top. I think it was like $30,000 or $50,000. Again, forgive me, I don't remember off the top, but a pretty substantive number. And they just write a check like, "Here you go, not a loan. Here you go." So Dr. King sees the power of developing these black enterprises, but we don't get there. Jesse doesn't really commit to building this nationally, and then Dr. King is assassinated. After that, the focus really shifts again to jobs. It doesn't really go beyond that. And then Ralph Abernathy takes over the organization. Dr. King is dead. Abernathy's the guy now. Abernathy and Jesse just are not getting along at all. And Jesse feels like, I'm producing all the revenue. He develops the Black Expo, a lot of innovative, great things that are making money. And Jesse is just like, why do I need to keep sending all this money back to Atlanta? I made it. And in fact, Abernathy wants him to move to Atlanta to run Breadbasket again nationally. Jesse's like, no, I'm not coming to Atlanta. And so this goes back and forth until finally Jesse just says, I'm good. And he leaves. He leaves SELC. And again, I've talked to, older folks around Chicago who are around. They say, look, a lot of these black business folks said, you don't need them. Let's just do our own thing. And he steps down. And like December and then Christmas, he announces, I'm starting Rainbow Push Coalition. Like that quickly, within a few days. And so now all ties are severed. And so he starts Rainbow Push, and that's that. But I think Operation Breadbasket, it had the potential to be the start of an economic movement, but it was not something that Dr. King had the right people in place to replicate nationally. Jesse certainly wasn't doing that. Maybe he was concerned about his own kingdom. I don't know. I've never interviewed the guy, but it just doesn't happen. But also the program, it doesn't really mature beyond jobs. That's a starting point. It doesn't get beyond that. Maybe we need to learn from Elijah Muhammad and other people about a blueprint. For Breadbasket to really be effective, it would have to be something that Dr. King and everyone around him really fully bought into, because what he starts to notice is that money dries up. A lot of the white liberals, they stopped giving money because now we're talking about economics, and we were cool with sitting at the lunch counter and making white people rich, but we're not cool with you trying to own the lunch counter. They back up. So those funds are not there. Again, in Chicago, Jesse he's got it going. A lot of these black business owners, they're supporting this. They're funding it. And that's the model that we need to shift to. But until everyone really buys in and they go fully into it, it's not going to work out. But at the same time, Dr. King's organization is fracturing. Jesse wants to do his own thing in Chicago. James Bevel, also in Chicago, he wants to just do Vietnam. People are kind of going in separate directions, and Dr. King doesn't really seem to have control over it. And then he gets assassinated, and then game over.
I gotta go. I gotta get up and go. I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta get up and go. I gotta get up and leave. I gotta get up and go. I gotta go. I gotta get up and go. They waiting on me when I walk out the door. They counting on me to get ready to blow. Too many people saying I'm the hero. Too many people looking up to me. Can't let them down, not an option for me. Don't even matter if you rocking with me. I touch down even if you ain't blocking for me. No BS and no negativity. Only dealing with positive energy. Yeah, it's haters and doubters surrounding me. I don't pay them no man, they ain't stopping me. Like Brady and Jordan, no topping me. I'm MVP in every category. My confidence grows every day that I rise. Gotta get up and go, keep my eye on the prize. I gotta go, manifesting on my hopes and dreams. I gotta go, yo, I'm strategizing like I'm coaching the team. I got places to go, I got people to see, I got things to do. Yo, I'm through with surviving, it's time to start living, I don't know about you. That's what I see for myself, speak over my life, I got riches and wealth. Take it in stride one day at a time, no malice inside, I'm nothing but blessed.